There comes a moment when holding everything together is no longer possible. In this episode, I explore the breaking point, not as failure, but as the moment something finally tells the truth. I reflect on the difference between collapse and clarity, and why what feels like falling apart can sometimes be the beginning of coming back to yourself. This is a gentle conversation for anyone who has feared breaking, only to realise that breaking may have been the start of healing. Now we're halfway through the first 10 episode series about the journey from being unseen, ignoring the signs, knowing the truth, staying, paying the cost, breaking, stopping the explanations, choosing yourself, finding your voice, and turning survival into meaning.
Welcome to Not Just a Story with Rose Davidson, where lived experience becomes meaning and stories create impact.
Hello and welcome to Not Just a Story with Rose Davidson. I'm Rose Davidson, and this is the place where we explore lived experience, not as something to hide from, but as something that can help us understand ourselves, each other, and the moments that shape who we become. Today's episode is all about the moment you broke. That might sound heavy, and in some ways it is. But I also want this conversation to feel gentle, because breaking is something many people fear. We fear falling apart. We fear not coping. We fear being seen when we are no longer able to hold ourselves together. But sometimes the moment we break is not the moment we fail. Sometimes it is the moment the truth finally has room to breathe. There is a moment in many people's lives where holding it together is no longer possible. It might happen quietly. It might happen in the middle of a normal day while you're making a cup of tea, driving home, sitting on the edge of the bed, standing in the shower, or starting and staring at a message you cannot answer. It might happen after one big event. Or it might happen after years of small things. One more responsibility, one more disappointment, one more silence, one more demand, one more moment of pretending you are fine when you are not. And then something gives, not because you are weak, not because you are dramatic, and not because you did not try hard enough, but because you have been holding too much for too long. I think we often misunderstand breaking. We talk about people falling apart as though it is something shameful. We say things like, I lost it, or I couldn't cope, or I had a breakdown. And underneath those words, there can be so much judgment. We judge ourselves for crying. We judge ourselves for needing rest. We judge ourselves for not being able to answer messages. We judge ourselves for cancelling plans. We judge ourselves for needing help. We judge ourselves for becoming quiet. We judge ourselves for not being the version of ourselves that everyone else is used to. But what if breaking is not always falling apart? What if sometimes breaking is what happens when the part of us that has been pretending can no longer continue? What if breaking is the moment our body, our heart, our mind, or our spirit says, I cannot carry this in silence anymore? There is a difference between collapse and clarity. At first, they can feel the same. When you reach a breaking point, it can feel like collapse. It can feel like everything you depend on inside yourself has suddenly gone. You may feel overwhelmed. You may feel exhausted. You may feel frightened. You may feel numb. You may feel angry. You may feel embarrassed. You may feel as though you should have seen it coming. But somewhere inside that collapse, there can also be clarity. A quiet knowing. A truth you may not have been ready to hear before. I am not okay. This cannot continue. I need something to change. I cannot keep being strong in this way. I have reached my limit. And although those words can feel frightening, they can also be the beginning of honesty. Not the polished kind of honesty that sounds good to other people. The real kind. The kind that comes from deep inside and says, this is where I am. Many of us have been taught to value strength in a very narrow way. We think strength means pushing through. We think strength means staying composed. We think strength means being reliable, capable, available, calm, productive, and endlessly understanding. We think strength means not needing too much. But there is another kind of strength. The strength to stop. The strength to admit the truth. The strength to say, I cannot do this anymore. The strength to let yourself be human. The strength to stop performing wellness when you are hurting. The strength to stop smiling when you are breaking inside. The strength to sit with what is real, even when it is uncomfortable. That kind of strength does not always look impressive from the outside. Sometimes it looks like tears. Sometimes it looks like silence. Sometimes it looks like leaving. Sometimes it looks like asking for help. Sometimes it looks like finally saying no. Sometimes it looks like doing absolutely nothing because your whole system is trying to recover. And sometimes that is the bravest thing you can do. The myth of falling apart is that it means you have become less than you were. But I do not believe that is always true. Sometimes falling apart is what happens when the version of you that was built for survival can no longer carry you into the next part of your life. That survival version of you may have done an incredible job. It may have kept you going through things that should never have happened. It may have helped you stay functional when life was anything but stable. It may have helped you protect others, make decisions, keep working, keep caring, keep showing up. But survival has a cost. And sometimes, when the immediate danger has passed, or when the pressure has gone on too long, the body begins to tell the story we kept hidden. The tiredness arrives, the tears arrives, the confusion arrives, the emptiness arrives, the anger arrives, the grief arrives. And we wonder, why now? Why am I breaking now? Why not then? Why not when it was happening? Why not when I should be moving forward? But the body does not always process things according to our timeline. The heart does not heal just because the calendar has moved on. The nervous system doesn't always understand that life is supposed to be different now. Sometimes it takes time for us to feel safe enough to feel what we could not feel before. And when those feelings arrive, they can feel like breaking, but maybe they are not proof that you are going backwards. Maybe they are proof that something inside you is finally asking to be heard. There are breaking points that other people see. The moment you cry in front of someone, the moment you leave a relationship, the moment you walk away from a job, the moment you say something out loud that you have kept hidden for years. But there is also breaking points no one sees. The night you sit alone and realise you are tired of pretending. The morning you wake up and cannot make yourself move. The moment you look in the mirror and you don't recognise the person looking back. The quiet thought, I cannot keep living like this. The deep ache of knowing something has to change, even if you do not know what that change is yet. Those unseen moments matter. They are part of your story too. Not every turning point arrives with an audience. Not every life-changing moment looks dramatic. Sometimes the deepest shifts happen quietly inside a person who has simply reached the end of what they can carry. I want to speak gently to anyone listening who has ever felt ashamed of breaking. You did not fail because you reached your limit. You did not fail because you could not keep smiling. You did not fail because you needed rest, support, space, or time. You did not fail because you were no longer able to be everything to everyone. There is a point where coping becomes a cage. There is a point where being strong becomes a mask. There is a point where holding it together means holding yourself away from the truth. And when that point comes, breaking may be the first honest thing that has happened in a long time. Of course, breaking does not feel beautiful when you are in it. It can feel terrifying. It can feel messy. It can feel confusing. It can feel like you are losing control. And sometimes when you're inside that moment, you cannot see what it is trying to show you. You may only see the pieces, the relationships that changed, the identity that no longer fits, the plans that fell away, the energy you no longer have, the version of yourself you cannot seem to get back to. But maybe healing is not always about getting back to who you were. Maybe something, and sometimes healing is about meeting who you are becoming. A person who no longer wants to live by pretending. A person who knows their limits matter. A person who understands that peace is not weakness. A person who is learning that their story deserves tenderness. A person who is beginning to listen to themselves differently. Breaking can strip away the performance. It can show us what we were tolerating. It can show us where we were silencing ourselves. It can show us where we confused endurance with love. It can show us where we believed we had to earn care. It can show us where we kept saying, I'm fine, because we did not know how to say, I'm hurting. That clarity can be painful, but it can also be sacred, because once you see something clearly, you can begin to choose differently. Not all at once, not perfectly, not with a neat plan and a confident smile, but slowly, one honest breath at a time. There is no shame in the moment you broke. There may be grief there. There may be regret. There may be exhaustion. There may be questions you still cannot answer. But shame does not have to be the final meaning you give it. You can look back at that moment and say, that was the day I could not pretend anymore. That was the day my body told the truth. That was the day I reached the edge of what I could survive. That was the day something in me asked to be cared for. That was the day everything changed, even if I did not understand it then. When we share stories of breaking, we often want to rush to the redemption. We want to say, but then I rebuilt, but then I found my purpose, but then everything made sense. And sometimes that's true. But I also think we need space for the middle, the tender, uncertain middle, the part where you are not who you were, but you do not yet know who you are becoming. The part where you are tired, the part where you are quiet, the part where you are learning how to trust yourself again, the part where you are not ready to turn your pain into a lesson, the part where all you can do is breathe, rest, and make it through the day. That part matters. You do not have to turn your breaking point into a powerful story before you have had time to live through it. You do not have to explain it beautifully. You do not have to make it inspiring for anyone else. Your first responsibility is to make your pain useful. Your first responsibility is to be gentle with yourself inside it. And later, when you're ready, you may begin to understand what that moment gave you. Perhaps it gave you permission to stop. Perhaps it gave you the courage to leave. Perhaps it gave you the truth you had been avoiding. Perhaps it showed you who was safe. Perhaps it showed you who wasn't safe. Maybe it helped you see that you matter too. Perhaps it became the beginning of a different relationship with yourself. Breaking is not always the end of the story. Sometimes it is the beginning of the part where you finally stop abandoning yourself. So today I want to offer you a reflective question. Not to force an answer, not to dig up anything before you're ready, just as something to sit with gently. What part of you finally stopped holding everything together, and what was it trying to show you? Maybe your breaking point showed you that you were exhausted. Maybe it showed you that you needed support. Maybe it showed you that a relationship, role, belief, or pattern could not continue. Maybe it showed you that the life you had built was no longer the life that could hold you. Maybe it showed you that beneath all the coping, there was still a part of you asking to be heard. Whatever it showed you, I hope you can meet that part of your story with compassion. You do not need to judge the moment you broke. You can honour it. You can say, that was painful and I survived it. You can say, that was messy and it mattered. You can say, that was not my failure, that was my truth asking for air. If this episode had touched something in you, take your time with it. You may want to journal, you may want to sit quietly. You may want to talk to someone safe. You may want to simply acknowledge that there was a time when you broke, and that moment deserves kindness and not shame. And if one day you feel ready to explore your own lived experience as a story, remember this. Your story does not have to be polished to matter. It does not have to be dramatic to be powerful. It does not have to be fully healed to be meaningful. Sometimes the most human stories are the ones that say, I broke and I'm still here. Thank you for listening to Not Just a Story with Rose Davidson. May you meet your breaking points with tenderness. May you remember that falling apart is not always failure. And may you know that sometimes when something finally gives, something true can begin. Take a moment to reflect on your own story, gently and without pressure. When you're ready, Your lived experience may become a story that helps someone else feel less alone.
Thank you for listening to Not Just a Story with Rose Davidson. If something in this episode stayed with you, you're invited to reflect on your own story, in your own way, in your own time. And if you feel ready, you can share your story through the Impactful Voice Project at rosedavidson.com.au. This is a space where lived experience is honored and stories are shared with care. Until next time, your story matters.